find lessons that you can take home which can impact your own classroom presence and classroom environment. So please keep a sheet ready in your hand and kindly make notes, because every 10 minutes I will stop and give you about 1 or 2 minutes, and I'll ask you to post just a one line take home from the previous 10 minutes. All right. So is this clear to all of you, the participants?
Yes.
Yes,
Devasena madam, was I clear?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Okay. All right. And I hope by now the screen is also visible to everybody.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, perfect. So, welcome to all of you. And this is the kind of classroom that we very rarely encounter, but which is the kind of classroom that we are trying to promote here in the Teaching Learning Center. And there is a reason why there is value to a classroom like this. This, you can see, is very, very different from the classroom wherein you have a sage on a stage, a teacher who is teaching on the board, and then a large number of people sitting and listening, and so on. You will find that they're all engaged, they're writing. This is one of the reasons why I requested all of you to keep a sheet of paper ready with you so that you make notes. And once in 10 minutes, I will ask you to actively engage with me by sending just a one liner, one line take home that each one of you has gotten from 10 minutes of discussion. So you will see that the learners here are actively engaging, they are discussing with one another. This is like in our office space, isn't it? So we learn in our office environments, and there is a lot of evidence that when classrooms are conducted this way, it ends up being much more efficacious. And I'll present some evidence for the same as well. Not only that, there is another critical difference between what we see in most of the classrooms and this classroom. Here, every learner is trying to help one another. Every learner is trying to share their knowledge and participate. So it is cooperative, which is very different when compared to the competitive dynamics that is unfortunately a part of our existence on a daily basis in our university ecosystems. There is a lot of evidence that competition is not the way forward. Active cooperation, that means getting learners to learn from one another, cooperate with one another in the learning experience, is tremendously valuable. And this comes out of science by research, and I'll give some evidence for the same. Also, interestingly, and this might be very important, it correlates with satisfaction of learners and satisfaction that teachers have. All of us are familiar with challenges teachers face, burnouts teachers face, exhaustion teachers face, etc. It turns out that this approach not only facilitates the learner, it also facilitates teachers. So I hope what is being discussed here will be of value to your students, but yourselves as well. So, in an email that Professor Devasena sent me, she said that these are the outcomes that PhD intends for their teachers. And in my mind, when I read this list, I thought I'll need a magic wand. You know, this is the fairy's magic wand, you know, using the magic wand to solve all this. But it is a very rich set of outcomes that PhD seeks, and it's really wonderful that PhD seeks this. And I believe every management should seek something of this sort. But what is very clear is that it's a journey. We will slowly get to each of these, okay? For instance, improvement in teaching, all of us want this. New cooperative strategies, all of us need this. We would like to be more cooperative colleagues. We would like to have our students to cooperate more with us. Teaching tools, I'll talk a little bit about that. Then how to make students attentive during online sessions. One trick I have already shared with you in some sense is asking you for a certain degree of accountability. That is asking you to share what you learn over a 10-minute period whenever we pause. Okay, so that can be a teaching tool, very simple approach. And this is sort of a modification on what is called as minute paper that you find in teaching learning literature. Then effectively utilizing digital platform for teaching learning processes. I will talk about that. Engagement of students in online classes, and then laboratory courses, an extraordinary challenge for those of us who run laboratory courses to do it entirely via media, and TLP, and handling, this is the word, but maybe we can just say that people who learn differently. All right, how to help people who learn differently. So one of the things that I wanted to also highlight before moving forward was that each of these questions that were asked tied to a large number of areas of research in teaching learning. So areas in research in teaching learning broadly can be called either pedagogy if it is teaching children, or andragogy when it is teaching adults. So it turns out that there are many areas of research in education today. So I suspect that there are people from humanities, management, science, engineering, nursing, medicine, law, all of those here, because PSG is a very large umbrella of organizations. And so that is all the more reason why I try to make it somewhat comprehensive here. So the first one is philosophical foundations of education. And I think for the management, for people in administration also, this is very relevant. What is the intent and purpose? Sorry. What is the intent and purpose of education? Like, what is it that we are trying to do in an educational environment? Why do we do what we do? That is the question. And it's a question on philosophy, it's a question on value system. And that in turn influences the processes we have in place. For example, some universities tend to be very interdisciplinary, some other universities are not so interdisciplinary. That comes from philosophical foundations. And some universities will have curriculum that uses a lot of online educational platforms. Some universities will not use a lot of online educational platforms. That also ties to the way in which we think about educational processes. And we also think about curriculum. Why do we worry about curriculum? We worry about curriculum because we want our learners to learn something tangible through our experience with them. Similarly, there is something called sociology of education, which is increasingly important because we don't want just 10% of our population to be educated. We want 100% of our population to be educated. But that means unique challenges because there are many students whose backgrounds may not necessarily support education and so on. What does it mean to help such students? That is the philosophy of inclusive education. And many of us have had students who might be visually impaired or so and so. How to help students from all these different contexts, and how do we in turn help the students make a difference to the societies that they are part of? How do we help students achieve social mobility and education ideally extended through them to the rest of the society? Educational psychology, here is where it becomes very relevant, not just to people in humanities, but in the sciences. And I will give you some examples wherein medical researchers, for example, and psychologists have come together to analyze education, to do research in educational psychology, where people are looking at learning styles. How is it that we learn? And I can tell you, for instance, I am a very visual learner. I don't know how each one of you is, and each one of you is likely to have a very different style of learning. Some of you might like a textual approach to style learning. Some of you might like a dialogical style of learning. So learning what your learners are is a very important part of creating a good, healthy environment. And mental processes involved in learning. It's a very long area of research, at least 60, 70 years of research in this space, but still a lot of unanswered questions. Student outcomes, teaching methods, giftedness. All of us know that there is this small category of students who are extremely gifted. You don't need to give them much. They multiply whatever you give them. And they may get bored if you teach to them just the way you teach to the rest of the class. So how do you handle that? And disabilities. So this is in some sense the other end of the spectrum, wherein a student might have autism or dyslexia, so is not able to read well. How do you help such students? So today's educator will benefit from research outcomes from each of these areas. Next is teaching and learning. Personality. Those of you who are from the, again, medical school and also humanities, certain areas in soft sciences, human sciences, know that personality itself is an area of research. A lot of work has gone in. Intelligences. So education researchers are increasingly coming out of the idea of one type of intelligence to multiple types of intelligence. For instance, classically, even in India, for instance, we think of intelligence as the ability to clear an exam. And that clearly doesn't necessarily always map to life outcomes. So intelligence is increasingly being mapped to life outcomes, and we are increasingly trying to map it to educational environments. Adjustment of students, very important issue. As I said, it could students coming from different backgrounds face very different challenges in their teaching learning environments. Truancy is going to be a very big problem with online education. So this upcoming semester is going to be challenging for all of us, because in principle the students could could be logged in but might be looking away from the screen or be watching something else. So there could be digital truancy, I would call it. But on a regular basis, there is, of course, physical truancy, wherein you have a physical class and the students don't turn up. And delinquent behavior, which is misbehavior in the class, all of us have experienced, including myself, a little bit of that. Special education. Then information and communication technology. Here is where there were a couple of questions from PSG about and digital resources. Towards the end of this lecture, I will also give you some uh, resources that Cornell University has put together to help with this teaching during COVID, and I will make the link available and so on. So this comes from their own teaching learning center and their own research in that area and so on. So you can benefit from that. Guidance and counseling. Many of us do give guidance and counseling to our students based on, of course, how educated they are, the level of engagement we have had with them, our awareness of the students and so on. Teacher education, very important. This is an example of teacher education. It is in-service training. I'm sorry, this gets hidden. But the next one is standards parity. Standards parity means how do you make sure that teachers in University X are by and large able to give the same kind of exposure to their students as teachers in University Y. So how do we ensure that across the country, across the world? Because in principle, it shouldn't matter where a student is born. And research in education, that is methods and procedure. Economics of education, this is again very important for the administrators. Budgets, privatization, demand, supply, etc. So there is research going on in each of these areas, cutting across variety of disciplines, from humanities to there are engineering education researchers to, let us say, nursing, medical education researchers, and so on. Now, so because it is just not possible to do justice to all of this, because there is an extraordinary body of literature out there, I will start out by just trying to achieve a very modest and actionable outcome. What we could aim for is trying to see what science tells us about cooperative learning. By science, I mean through research, reproducible results. What do we know about cooperative learning, about the practice of cooperative learning, the outcomes, but also challenges. So very often advocates of cooperative learning present cooperative learning as a very sort of a one pill solution. My own experience has been there are challenges, but there are fantastic outcomes also, but there are extraordinary challenges. So I have been reading literature on challenges associated with cooperative learning. I'll make that available to you also. And achieving it in class and online settings. So this is what we will do. I will, at this minute, pause for a while to let each of you sort of think about your own notes that you have been making through this lecture. The keywords would be learning process, cooperative learning, student attention, student engagement, inclusion of learners, formation of teachers, administrative roles for enabling teachers. So if you could write just one line, all of you, if you could just write one line actionable take home for you from the previous 10 minutes of discussion. So for example, that one line could be, I learned that using dash is helpful. I learned that there is opportunity for dash. Just something like that. Okay. So I'll pause for a minute or two here, and I will ask you to send. I will ask you to send the one-liner on the chat box here. All of you. You can take a minute and type it out in the chat box here. All of you. All right. So I'm waiting for some inputs, all of you. Just one line take home. Very good. So cooperative learning, I can, very good. Cooperative learning facilitates learners and teachers. Some of you said changing scenario of global education, fantastic. Importance of peer learning, excellent. Student engagement is crucial, very good. Oh, very nice. Some of you said I'll take this opportunity to learn more about my students. Very good. So some of you said will pay attention to challenges in online teaching. Ah, all right. So somebody said about educational psychology, so that they will look into it, peer learning, comprehensive educational approach. Fantastic. Somebody said education should be thought of comprehensively. Somebody said it helps, this approach can in principle help understand the student better. Very good. So all of you are thinking right. I'm very happy. Significance of peer learning, teacher-student interactions, counseling and guidance is part of educational research. Exactly. That's right. Why we do what we do. Fantastic. Yes. So somebody has posted a question about strategies to keep students active in online learning. Sure. All right. Okay. So keep it coming. Keep it coming. So I'll resume the lecture. So Devasena madam, are you able to see the slides?
Yes, sir. Yes,
Yeah.
sir. We are
Okay.
able to see.
So, so here is a concept that has been around now for at least a few years and which has been very powerful. In particular, in Australia, this has been tried out much more than in many other parts of the world, with the other exceptions being, I think, Sweden and Norway. So, but there is tremendous value to trying this out. And also some universities in West Indies have tried this approach. So this approach is students as co-creators of the teaching learning process. So what do you mean by co-creators of the teaching learning process? So think about yourself and your role as a teacher. What are you trying to do? You're trying to create the teaching learning process. You're trying to give content, you're trying to engage with the students, you're trying to talk to them, find out their difficulties, and so on and so on. Now, how do we usually handle a situation like that in our work environment? Usually, we do it in a very democratic manner. We say, what are your thoughts? What would you like to do? Where do you think your strengths are? How can this course help you better? How do you think this course can be more tailor-made to suit your future requirements? So students can be co-creators of the teaching learning process. And when you make students a co-creator of the teaching learning process, they know that their feedback is welcome. For instance, when I asked you to type out just one line, many of you typed it out. It is in one way trying to make sure that I am not running this whole thing, that all of us, 100 plus people here, are trying to do something together. Because now you can scroll back and forth and see what others are thinking also. So there is some kind of feedback. There is confidence. Now, this is a particular challenge for many students because what happens in university classrooms, you have a person with a PhD, typically with a PhD walk-in, who is an expert in an area, teaching the area. He or she knows the area through and through. So he or she is very confident. Now, in the presence of somebody who is very, very confident, let us say, the student will find it very hard to be vulnerable. On the other hand, in the presence of other students, the students can open up and say, look here is where I have a challenge. I don't think I understand this. And another student who is also trying to learn might help that student. So in doing so, the students learn together and give confidence to one another. So this is a critical outcome, and it, as I said, has been shown in many places, including in here, for instance, Taiwan. There has been a study, 2015, very influential study, very important study, that was that basically supported the fact that co-creation of teaching learning processes with students, sometimes even as young as first year students, is enormously valuable. So the key to teaching learning is really communication and collaboration. Communication and collaboration, the two C's. The two C's are communication and collaboration. Now here is literature that points to students how they valued the classroom experience. So students valued classroom participation, and those who valued classroom participation showed higher involvement. This comes from literature in language education, but it is shown through and through across the board, across a wide variety of different disciplines. Students, when they co create courses, when they feel that they are part of the course, they tend to take a little bit more autonomy. They open up to the teachers, they open up to one another, they take ownership of the course, and they also tend to have greater satisfaction. So, in other words, students must read, write, discuss, and be engaged in problem solving. This is one of the reasons why I said all of you should have a sheet of paper. You must read, write, discuss with one another, and we will have an opportunity to discuss at the very end. So I will stop in advance to make sure that there is opportunity to discuss. But you will see that in Taiwan, for instance, it's an Asian culture, so very similar to us, but there have been successful experiments that are going on in this space. Now, research outcomes, benefits of ACL. The benefits are as follows. Students demonstrate academic achievement. So they demonstrate higher ownership of the course. That means they feel like this course is mine. They don't think of the course as being the professor's course. They think of the course as my course. So they feel like doing a lot more for the course. And as a consequence, the academic achievement goes up. And it should not surprise you teachers to find out when academic achievement goes up, your satisfaction goes up. Next is cooperative learning are equally effective for all ability levels. Now, this is important. When we used to run FDPs, for instance, in TLC and so on, we got a lot of questions and concerns about students at different levels. That means to say a student who may need a lot of time to learn something versus student who just picks things up quickly. It turns out that having groups that are roughly similar in ability, by that what I mean is, if I have, let us say, this group and this group, that in as a group their ability is roughly similar to their ability as a group, is similar to their ability as a group. If the ability of the group is roughly similar, then all the students learn. So the students who are relatively rapid learners, they learn, but students who need time, they also learn. And in fact, the rapid learners in a cooperative environment help the learners who need support. Next is cooperative learning is effective for all ethnic groups. So I have told you that in Taiwan, West Indies, Australia, Norway, Sweden, these studies have been independently conducted. And in principle, we could do this in India. And that's why I wanted to talk about education research. And it is effective across all ethnic groups, so it is not culture dependent. Student perceptions of one another has enhanced. Now, this is wonderful, isn't it? Because you want students to cooperate with one another, and you want students to be able to build partnerships with one another, because tomorrow in the real world, they are expected to build partnerships with one another. So they end up having greater ability to cooperate, coordinate, have better self-esteem, more ownership, and so on. And it also turns out that the usual barriers start getting broken down. I have seen this in my own classroom, wherein I have had students who are visually impaired and in a couple of cases marginally dyslexic. It turns out that the usual barriers get broken down because students start also demonstrating sympathy and empathy for their fellow learners and try to help. And this is also very good for society at large. Cooperative learning results in higher level reasoning, generation of new ideas and solutions. I have seen this in my classrooms, by the way, where undergraduate students ask questions and some of them become short undergraduate research projects. And this is one place, for example, where research and learning can go hand in hand, and greater transfer of learning between situations. So I'll pause here and show you this. I'll probably speak for a minute more and then pause. Now, it is clear that one way in which you can actually organize your classes and organize your courses is by having what are called as learning outcomes. I'm sure many of you are already using this, but I want to highlight that learning outcomes should contain verbs. For instance, if you're a medical doctor and you're training people to be doctors, you can say at the end of this course, the student should be able to diagnose dash, dash, and dash, report dash dash and dash, write dash and dash. If you are an engineer, then you could say define dash and dash, design dash and dash, create dash and dash, develop dash and dash. If you're a humanities person, it would be again similar, articulate dash and dash, identify dash and dash, deconstruct dash dash, and so on and so on. So the learning outcome should inevitably have a verb followed by something like this. Should be able to define basic theories related to engine combustion, evaluate engine performance. This is just an example from engineering, for instance, but as I said, if you're a medical doctor, it would be different. It would be the student should be able to do diagnosis of so and so, evaluation of so and so, prognosis of so and things of that sort. If you're an architecture professor, then it would be draw so and so, design so and so, develop so and things of that sort. But all of us would require our students to write. This is very important, which is one of the reasons why I said it is good for you to actually write, have a sheet of paper and write. So this very precise definition of learning outcomes for each class and also for the course at large helps you also direct your students in the right direction and measure their outcomes in a very precise manner. So at this point, I will stop for 2 minutes and ask you to post one line take home you have received from the last 10 minutes. Just one line take home. So take 2 minutes or so and please write down just one line take home. All of you are welcome to write it down. All of you. Just one line take home from the last 10 minutes. What is one lesson you learned as a teacher that you think will be useful for you from the last 10 minutes of discussion? Very nice. So co-creation can help students take ownership of the course. Very good. So Sindhu Madam talks about benefits of cooperative learning. Co-creation can make students feel more accountable and make them more cooperative. Very good. Learning outcome and its correct expression, that is the use of verb, isn't it? Very good. How to frame LO clearly using verbs. Very good. Reading, writing, discussion will give satisfaction to both students and teachers. That's very good. Read, write, discuss. Absolutely. Wonderful. Mr. Satyanathan. Very good. Then students are co-creators of a course. Very good. And LOs properly defined and well informed. LOs properly defined and well informed. Okay, so it should cover the scope of the course. Welcome new ideas from students. Dr. Tara says, very good. Ownership of their learning process. Mr. Venkat says, very nice. Cooperative learning improves self-esteem, self-confidence. Wonderful. Devsena Madam says, groups of students with similar abilities come together and learn. Very nice. Many of you like the idea of co-creation, isn't it? I can see that. Then HOD, AFD, PSG, CT. AFD stands for HOD, okay.
Apparel fashion.
Apparel and fashion design.
Okay, I see. Fashion design, wonderful. Okay. Active learning group should have roughly similar ability. Very good. Students as co-creators improves TLC. Students must read, write, discuss with peer. Absolutely. Discussion with peer, making students active learners. Wonderful. Research on TLP in India needs to be done at higher level. Very nice. Very good point. Who is this? Mr. Ganesh Uchi. Very nice. And importance of sympathy and empathy. Absolutely. I hope we never lose it in educational environments. And breakdown of social barriers, wonderful. Engaging students is important. Evaluation, helping fellow learners, framing outcomes, Communication and collaboration. Somebody picked up on the double C, communication and collaboration. First session must be okay. And somebody says the first class can be introducing learning outcomes to the students. Miss Susitra says that. Very good point. So you can start your courses by talking about learning outcomes. Absolutely. And Miss Umanathan has said research and learning can go hand in hand. I totally agree. As I said, in my course, I have found that sometimes questions that students bring up gives me an opportunity to talk about literature, and then gives me an opportunity to give an undergraduate research project or something of that sort. And if it is a master's or PhD level course, sometimes it actually helps them define the research problems. And I've seen that also, because there have been students who have come back to me and said, oh, you taught this course and this was very helpful in defining this problem and so on. So I suspect many of you know about Bloom's taxonomy. So Bloom's taxonomy enables you to think about a hierarchy of learning. For instance, the most fundamental level is remembering. Now, all of us know this, isn't it? In our own area, we remember all the basic facts and concepts by and large. For instance, if you have been teaching thermodynamics forever, I'm sure in the middle of the night, you can recite the second law of thermodynamics and you won't have any problem. If you're a professor of cardiology, you could talk about, some cardiomyopathy in the thick of the night, no problem, and things of that sort. Understand is a slightly higher level, wherein you would like the students to explain the concepts. For instance, two very closely related ideas. Let us say the idea of, I'm just giving an example. Let us say the idea of exergy and entropy. How are they similar? How are they different? At the face value, they sound somewhat similar, but what is similar? What is different? So you start understanding. After you understand, you apply it to practical problems. Then you analyze whether your understanding is right. Sometimes you have to go back and forth. And you also have to evaluate, and finally you create an idea. Typically for PhD students, we expect them to do something at least at this level, create something original, which is why doctoral dissertations require this person to declare that it is new and original work, not submitted anywhere else for degree. Now, having said that, education researchers know, and you and me from our experience, we know that we don't have to necessarily walk them through a pyramid. For instance, I have taught classes wherein I would usually give a problem at this level. Like, imagine that you have to solve this problem. Imagine that you are given this task. How would you think about this? So here is textual material. What concepts do you think are most important? So in that process, you get them excited because you are actually connecting it to a creation or design opportunity, a practical problem, a real life problem. And that can be one way in which you can engage your students and get them excited about your subject. Not necessarily walking them linearly, but sometimes also challenging them by positing a question at a slightly higher level in Bloom's taxonomy. Now, this is a lesson plan that I think will help a lot of you. This appeared in Chemical Engineering Education. I am sorry, I missed the year. It was the year early 2000s, 2005 or 6 was when this paper was published. It is one of the most widely cited papers in education research at large, by the way, not just in chemical engineering education, but education research at large. So here is how this set of professors came together and based on their study decided that the lesson plan that flows like this seems to be most reasonable. This lesson plan, after their publication, became known as the Bookend Lecture. Bookend, B-O-O-K-E-N-D, Bookend Lecture Plan. It became called as the Bookend Lecture Plan or Bookend Lesson Plan. So you have an initial summary, 5 minutes, lecture, 10 minutes. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm limiting myself to about 10 minutes. Recap, 3 to 4 minutes. I'm trying to limit it to 1 to 2 minutes. Then lecture, then some activity, then lecture for 10 minutes, and finally summarize. After this, it turns out that after the publication of this research, and especially citing this research in the last 5 years or so, believe it or not, neurologists have been using this to study the time at which a student learns maximally using neuroimaging techniques. So this would be interesting to PhD medical school professors, for instance. And a lot of studies are showing that there is peaking of learning, not here or here, but somewhere in the middle. So most people seem to peak somewhere at about 6 minutes to 7 minutes. And after that, it is dwindling. So you need to, so one of the questions that people are asking now in education research is, should we revisit this plan? This is very widely cited, remember. Instead of 10 to 15 minutes, should we make it shorter? Should we make this shorter? And we have more segments in our lecture. So this is called the bookend lecture plan, which is exactly what I said. And there are fMRI studies, and I have cited that. So 2013, this was the first study that looked at how students learn, and the activity in the frontal cortex was in the frontal lobe was actually evaluated for particularly higher order thinking. And it turns out that the student activity, brain activity, seemed to peak at about 6 minutes to 7 minutes, in that range. So all of us are by and large the same. We are all human beings, and so I think it is true for most of us. Most of us switch off beyond a certain point, which is why I'm trying to give some breaks during this lecture. But this is a classic paper now, and there is possibility of doing fantastic research between education across the board and neuroimaging, psychology as a consequence. And there is nothing like this going on in India right now. But PSG is different from the campus I am in right now, because the campus I am in right now is populated with scientists and engineers. We don't have lawyers, medicine men, nurses, fashion designers, architects, or any such. So you have a much fuller campus, and hence I think the possibilities are much more in PSG. So I would encourage you to partner with one another, cooperate, collaborate, and create education research opportunities for yourself. If you need help for the same, I am happy to help. Now, active cooperative learning techniques. So there are techniques. The first technique that is very helpful is called think, pair, share. Now, this think, pair, share is very helpful in a physical classroom. It is very hard in a digital classroom. So what is think, pair, share? You cover some lectures, some lecture content, and ask students to pair up, turn to their neighbor and discuss. Just turn to the neighbor and discuss. That's all. Just turn to the neighbor, discuss, come back. So sometimes you can give a probe question. For example, after covering this some lecture for 10 minutes or 6 minutes, something in that range, you can tell them, think about what we covered in the last 6 to 10 minutes, and turn to your neighbor and tell about one thing you learned from the last 6 to 10 minutes. That's all. So the person X shares something, the neighbor shares something else, and they'll both learn from one another. And please note, the person X would not have thought the way the other person would have. So the person X's learning has improved because of this. The other one is clicker question. So in clicker question is, you put a question on board and ask students to give the answer, and you count the clicks. And then you say, oh, we have only 60% respondents. Why don't we have more? So you encourage participation that way, and you can poll the class that way. So these are some ways in which you can nudge students. So you can give them credits for the work that they're doing. For example, you can say, oh, this student, I see that you have gotten the answer correct. Can you explain your thinking, please? So you give credit to the student and you convert that into a learning process. All right. So minute paper is a very powerful technique. Again, these were a set of medical professors who published this in a medical education journal, and they found that minute paper is very valuable even for medical education, especially because medical education is factually very heavy and conceptually very heavy. So minute paper was very helpful, because what these set of professors did is they broke the class in between and would ask students to write down 3 points that they took from this particular lecture, or 3 points that they took from the last 25 minutes of lecture, or something like that. There are other ideas like concept maps. I'll come to that in a while. So the pointers are, the pointers are the following. Bookend lecture. By bookend lecture, what I mean is, remember, there is some kind of sharing activity, think, pair, share activity in between. You remember the bookend lecture here, right? So there is some recap, then discussion, and so on and so on. And increasingly, there is literature suggesting that this ACL, active learning, can be somewhere in between. Like, you need to have more slices of active learning. All right. So you can a priori, that means prior to the class, think about what questions you can give to help you with the bookend lecture. The next one is make sure that you hold students accountable, but don't intimidate your learner. That means don't scare them. If they are scared of you, they won't open up. This is also true for administrators. Administrators and teachers in some sense are like teachers and students, because administrators in some sense ask for reports from teachers, and teachers ask for reports from students. So if the teacher scares the student, there is no way the student is going to report accurately. The same thing is true for administrators. The administrators ought to build a trusting relationship with the teachers. That is the only way in which the learning environment will become healthier. Also, don't pretend that the learners have a choice. So you tell the learners, look here, you have come here to learn. So you will interact, engage with one another, learn with one another. Q&A, decrease anonymity. That means, again, credit people. Suppose a person has done some additional work, credit the person in the class and say, can you now share this with others? Can you now teach others? And when you do that, you are building a mechanism by which you are crediting good people who are putting in good effort, and that builds the system. Basically giving credit where credit is due, and eliminating dominance of specific students, which all of us know that if you give time to discuss for 10 minutes, let's say 5 minutes, 80% of that time might be taken up by just one or two students who are very extroverted, enthusiastic, etc. So it is good to encourage them, but at the same time, please make sure that you ask students, other students. You can use your log sheet, your student roll number sheet, to pick students, say student X, student Y. Can you recall one or two things from the last 10 minutes, for instance? That would be one way in which you can ensure elimination of dominance. Next slide, madam. Madam, are you there? Next slide.
Yes, sir, yes.
Oh, I think there is a connectivity issue even now, madam.
I'm trying.
Okay, no problem. You can tell me which slide number you are in. Right now, you are in slide number 14, madam.
Can you
Can
see,
this
sir?
be in slideshow? Could you
No,
convert to slideshow, madam?
It is to think through.
Devsena ma'am, you just go to the slideshow, no? Then only you can go to the next slide.
Yeah, it is in the slideshow mode only.
No, but we are seeing the
Certainly.
general view. Yeah.
Yo, okay. So here it is in the slideshow. I think I have gone to the next slide. Details to think through.
No, but we are able to see only the 13th slide, pointers. And it is not in the full presentation mode.
Yeah, give me a minute.
Now it is clear.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now it's coming. Yes. All right. So the details that you could think through, all of you educators, are things of this sort. You could ask students, solicit questions they might have in their mind during the active cooperative learning approach. For instance, you could ask them to turn to one another, think, pair, share, and say, ask one question to your neighbor and elicit a response from her or him. Ask one question to the neighbor, or do you have any questions? So, but if it's usually better to make it very pointed, say one question, two questions, make it very pointed instead of just saying questions. Okay. Next is, how much time would you like to give for interaction? Here, the formulary that I have given, by formulary, I mean the bookend lecture formulary, is very helpful. For large classes, please make use of TAs. I hope in the PSG system you have teaching assistants. And I would strongly recommend that TAs also get some kind of teaching learning training. It is very helpful. Next is offer examples from real world. This is very similar to the Bloom's taxonomy, the create design, starting from create design.
This volume is.
Next is
excuse me, Teju sir. Can you be a bit louder? Your voice is slow.
You're not able to hear me?
Yes, we could hear, but the voice is low.
Oh, okay. So let me.
Madam, we are able to hear, ma'am. No problem.
Are you able to hear me
now?
Everything
fine for all of you?
Yes.
Yeah. Participants, can you put it in the chat box if sir's voice is clear?
Audible. Okay, clear. Devasena madam, are you able to hear me now?
Yeah, yes, better.
Much better, no? Yeah,
Yes,
yeah. So there was signal weakening on my end between, madam. Maybe that is what happened. Maybe that is what it is. Anyhow, so we'll stop here and ask for a 1 minute feedback. So, madam, you can show slide number 15 as we wait for 2 minutes, asking people to put just one point that they learned from the last 10 minutes, or maybe in this particular case, more than 10 minutes because of technical issues. Very good. So some people have said, so it's again from AFD, PSG, CT. You're very active. I'm very happy. So crediting good people and bookend lesson planning. Very good. And the bookend lesson plan, as I said, it's also called the formulary. And the formulary I have given can be used for all of you for planning your lectures. Adding more segments in the lecture, fantastic. For think, pair, share, or minute paper. Minute paper is what I'm asking you to do right now. It is a minute paper. Typically in literature, minute papers are used at the end of the lecture, but because this is an online class, the only way in which I can make sure that people are participating is by eliciting some response. That is why we are having more minute papers here. And you can use this as a trick as well for your classes. Give somebody from mathematics, maybe give first BSc stat students to apply methods to predict the number affected by COVID. Oh, wonderful. During the month of April. That's a fantastic assignment. And I actually have some, a few teachers have thought about this. And believe it or not, there is a very interesting set of exercises that are now available on YouTube on this real life application. Good. Very good. And then bookends lesson plan. But this is a fantastic suggestion. Miss Uma Ramanandan. Next is bookend lesson plan is interesting. Think, pair, share. Many of you like it. May include stat. That is very good. 1 minute paper is effective way of recalling. All of you think, pair, share is helpful. Very nice. And eliminate dominance. Eliminate dominance. That's a very important point. There is alternating lecture and student work. Wonderful. Segmentation. Appreciating students is essential. Very good. And by extension, as I said, administrators are expected to encourage teachers as well. Ask a slightly higher level question. Very good. Bloom's taxonomy. Bookend lesson plan. Many of you have said. LOs. Fantastic. And some plan for prior questions. Very good. Very good. Okay, madam. So next, we resume where we stopped last. Devasena madam, yes. Yes. So here is a paper, and this paper I'm sure many of you would have access to. This is another classic paper that came in American Journal of Health Behavior. And it shows essentially the satisfaction of students. The satisfaction of students depends upon the accessibility the teachers give. That means how accessible, approachable the teachers are. That is a very important parameter. Over and above that, learners really appreciate breaks. Learners actually feel happier. They feel that they have learned more when they have breaks. And this was actually done in the context of essentially children. That is education of children. But I believe that there may be something similar that is also available in the context of college education. I have not seen any papers on this, but what is rather remarkable is that what they find is, let us say in the think, pair, share activity, even if you ask people to walk around a little bit, go from one group to another group, they feel better about the class. They feel that they are more engaged in the class. So some physical activity along with the usual activity is very helpful for people. All right. So next, please. Next. All right. So anxious students. I'm sure many of you have experienced this. There are students who, once you adopt this new technique, they may feel fearful. They may think that they might come across as being a little behind the rest of the students, and so on, so on. They may feel more exposed and things of that sort. So student resistance has been studied in the context of active cooperative learning. And it turns out that typically this resistance comes because it's an externally induced change. That means you as a teacher are setting the rules and you are saying, okay, do this, do that. You are asking them to be active, asking them to be cooperative. But one way to overcome this is, number one, making sure that all students feel that they can be open and honest with one another and with you. Number two, being as transparent as possible. Your intentions are to make sure that they learn well. And that intention should be very, very transparently communicated to the students. When this goodwill is communicated to the students, and you can articulate it such, you can say that my interest is to make sure that maximum number of you get optimal outcome from this particular course. And to achieve that, I will do 1, 2, 3. So emphasize the benefits they get and also the fun associated with the activity. So students appreciate things of this sort. And as I said, give breaks. It is good for you too. Once in 10 minutes or so. Next, madam. Anxious teachers. So there are teachers who are anxious, and all of us know this. And some of you who are experienced teachers who are very accessible to younger colleagues, you must have heard younger colleagues approach you with anxiety and worry, seeking advice on how to manage classes and how to conduct lessons properly and so on, so on. So anxiety among teachers is also studied, by the way. What is rather interesting is when you ensure that the students are motivated, the anxiety associated with teachers comes down. So when the teachers know that their learners are motivated, that the learners are actively and cooperatively engaging with one another, the anxiety levels of teachers drops. So the solution seems to be active and cooperative engagement. Another way of thinking about it is the teacher can think of herself or himself as part of the community of learners. So instead of thinking about yourself as a Professor X trying to teach all the students, you can say, I am a learner trying to learn with all of you. I have some experience which I'm happy to share. I will set the ground rules. There will be a teaching and learning process here, but at the same time, I am a student for life. When you tell things of this sort, students feel excited and motivated, and you are setting a very good example for students whom you are saying that lifelong learning is a possibility. And this is where it starts. Next, please. So concept map is another trick that you can try in your group activities. So if you look at it carefully, it is a concept map associated with thermodynamics. So in thermodynamics, there are closed systems, open systems, thermodynamic cycles, flows, energy, compression, reversible processes, irreversible processes, and so on and so on. All right. How are these concepts connected to one another? How are these concepts connected to one another? You ask students to make this connected diagrams. Now, there are tremendous values associated with concept maps because this is by and large how the human brain learns. Those of you who are from medicine, for instance, certainly from the neurosciences, know this very well. Also, those of you who are from cognitive sciences, psychology, etc., has teach this to your students about the connectionist models of learning and connectivist models for memory. So this is exactly the same, but a physical embodiment, a practical embodiment of the same, wherein you have concepts that are connected to one another. Now notice that what I have found here is that it is actually very helpful for my research also. For instance, what I usually tell my research scholars is you create a concept map and then identify what are the links that are available and what are the links that have not been explored so far. Those links that are not explored so far might be possible directions for your own work, might be places where you can contribute to knowledge. So concept maps, as a consequence, can be a way of distilling out information from a large body of literature and identify gaps. So concept map is helpful for education in your own classrooms, but it's also very helpful for your own research. Next, please. Think, pair, share. So I've already told you this. Now, the think, pair, share part, there is a word here called scaffolding, which I want to sort of spend some time on. Scaffolding, the remaining things we have discussed. Scaffolding, basically, those of you who are civil engineers have used this word scaffold. You know, you build scaffolds for buildings and so on. So what is a scaffold? It helps build a structure. It is the same thing that you try to do for education also. You are trying to build a structure and then ask the students to fill the gaps. For example, you can say when it's a derivation, this is step one, and then if you assume x and y, then this will be step 4. Can you fill in step 2 and 3, please, for me? So what you're doing in mathematical derivations, for instance, then is you are giving step 1 and step 4 as hints, and then you say, okay, when from going from step 1 to 2, I have to make an assumption. Make the assumption and write it out. Make the assumption and write out 3 to 4, and then see what is emerging. So instead of going through rote derivation, you walk people through the process of science, and as a consequence, make them better learners. All right. So this approach is called the scaffolding approach. The Russian psychologist Vygotsky is credited with this technique, and it's very, very helpful in even teaching derivations, but also teaching concepts in general. For instance, you could say that there are 3 key ideas, 1, 2, 3. Now connect them. And you could ask students to basically put the pieces of the puzzle together, something like a jigsaw. And there is a method called the jigsaw, which is actually a specific case of scaffolding. Next, please. So some more tricks. Minute paper. I have already shared minute paper. We have been using minute paper in this class. Individual accountability. We have, that is giving credit where credit is due. Next is sample assessment plan. So this is something that you can put out in the first class itself, wherein you say my assessment will follow this approach. Another thing that I have found is very helpful for cooperative activity is eliminating competition. I know that we have all copy pasted the American model of fitting on the curve and seeing the Gaussian distribution for grades, and then give S for this students, A for these students, and so on, so on. But what has come out of literature is that when you basically tell that not more than X percentage of the class will ever get more than this particular grade, then you create competition and you prevent cooperation. So anything that prevents cooperation will cause trouble. So it is helpful for you to, on the other hand, to say anybody who gets S will have one very precise criteria, and A will have a precise criteria, B. So if 50% of your class is satisfying the criteria for criteria you have set, 50% of them get that grade. It is all right. So this is criteria-based evaluation as opposed to percentile-based evaluation. So criteria-based evaluation is found to promote cooperation much more than percentile-based assessment. And you could mention that in the first class. I usually mention that in the first class itself to make sure that competition is eliminated and cooperation is built. And then you can have ungraded problems given out that you can ask them to cooperate and solve outside of the class. And so on, so on. All right. But in all of these cases, make sure that you establish rules of the class. Make sure that the students are comfortable. You are comfortable. That between you and the students, there is a trusting relationship built. Everything is built on top of that. And by extension, between administration and the teachers, there should be a trusting relationship. Everything is built on top of that. And clarify terms of engagement. And you set the rules. Okay. And feel free to also use NPTEL, Vidyamitra, Swayam, other MOOC lectures that are available out there for scaffolding. For instance, you can say, watch the 10th to the 15th minute of this NPTEL video. You can share that before the class, say 2 days before the class. You don't have to ask them to see the full video, but say focus on 10th minute to 15th minute. That's all. And come back with what you think was the key outcome from that 10th to 15th minute lecture. So give them very pointed suggestions on as to what you want them to see in a MOOC. That way you can use MOOCs to scaffold your learning and teaching process also. We will stop here and get about We'll get some 1 minute, one-liners as feedback from one-liners take homes from people here. So one-liner, please. Very good. So somebody says eliminate competition, encourage cooperation, importance of transparency, importance of breaks. Very good. Concept map is a very helpful way of engaging students. Fantastic. Also, it turns out that the student learning outcomes improve with concept maps. Next is active cooperative engagement will reduce anxiety in teachers. Very good. Very good. I'm very happy to hear that you remember that anxiety in teachers and anxiety in students. See, learning can be a truly enjoyable process. It need not be anxiety inducing or stress inducing to anybody. Next is active cooperative learning. Goodwill is the foundation for learning teaching, true learning teaching. Fantastic. Uma Ramanathan Madam, Nandan Madam has said, anxious students and teachers, tricks 10 to 15-minute video. Yeah, exactly. So give a YouTube video link and tell them, take a look at this time frame, okay, this time window within this video, and come out and make notes and come. Scaffolding approach, fantastic. Think, pair, share, excellent. Don't talk for more than 10 minutes, very nice. Concept maps, very good. Scaffolding, conceptual learning, concept mapping. Monisha Gauri Madam says concept maps are better for better understanding. Susitra Madam says be a student with the students. Wonderful. Divya Prabha Madam says that minute paper is effective. Madam, it is effective across the board because there have been minute papers have been used in medical sciences, nursing, social sciences, and in recent times, even engineering educators have reported. It's very helpful. What I'm asking you to do here, for example, is an example of minute paper. Next is motivate students to learn. Very good. Criteria-based grading. Fantastic. Devasena Madam. Next is teacher as learner. HOD, AFD. Wonderful. Susila Madam says criteria-based education. Manu sir says teach, break, teach. Oh, wonderful. Teach, break, teach, he says. Very nice. Abdul Alim sir says lifelong learning. Wonderful. Good relationships are important, Satya says. Next is identify gap, think, pair, share. Next is concept, criteria-based education, managing anxiety. Very good. Need to have a balance between self-reflection and group activity, isn't it? So I agree with you, Mr. Vasu. I agree with you. That is important. So that is why think, pair, share has think first. I agree with that. So balanced approach is necessary. Learn, teach, learn cycle. Very good. Glodwin. So madam, we can go back to the slides. And we are running short of time also because of the technical glitches we had. But there are problems with ACL. As some of you pointed out, Mr. Vasu said that, you know, there has to be a balanced approach. I totally agree. There's no question about that. So there are limitations associated with ACL. The limitations are reported in literature also. So in fact, there is something called group hate. So there are some students who believe that their group may not be ideal for them. And this, as a consequence, the whole group suffers. So the person suffers and the group suffers. And very often this group hate can come because of loafing. That means some students not taking responsibility. This is why I said individual accountability is necessary. So in teaching learning literature, this is called positive codependence and individual accountability. So you have to balance positive codependence and individual accountability in order to ensure that group cohesion is maintained. So there is literature that is given in this regard also. More recent literature also exists on group hate, loafing and group cohesion related challenges. And conflict resolution can be achieved. See, one thing you could do in the context of a classroom is regrouping. That is possible. When you see that a particular group is not working out, you regroup. That is very, very valuable. Okay, so you will have to exercise your authority as a teacher and also your wisdom as somebody who is more experienced in this setting accordingly. Next, please. So encourage, manage, motivate. Encourage, manage, motivate. This is very, very important. So if you, maybe it is easier for you to remember if you say manage, encourage, motivate, or motivate, encourage, manage. So some of you are engineers and you must have studied MEMS, micro electromechanical systems. So it's something like that, micro electromechanical. Okay, so that's one way in which I remember, but I just wrote it out like this. So to manage, you can certainly ensure individual responsibility by seeing whether a particular student is loafing, whether they are not loafing, whether they are taking responsibility for themselves, etc. You could ask students to rate themselves. In fact, students can sometimes be very honest about rating themselves on a scale of 10. Sometimes they may be very off, but 8 out of 10 students, including the students who are not very engaged, come very clean. They honestly assess themselves. For example, one of the times I actually asked students, how engaged do you think you are in the class on a scale of 1 to 5 report? And I took it and basically that became part of what I took home. And I was surprised that their own self-assessment was more or less similar to my own assessment. And then I spoke to the students who were less engaged to find out what is needed so that they found it more engaging. So this is helpful. And by the way, here is where knowledge of learner types helps. So talk about learner types. There is some students are good with mathematical thinking. Some people are good at creative thinking. Some people are good at sort of synthetic thinking. Some people are good at analytic thinking. So you could have assignments and projects, etc., that are there as part of the course, or questions that actually address different learner types, distribute, so that on an average, all the learner types get something for themselves through your lecture. Next, please. This is learner motivation. Learner motivation, I strongly recommend this TED talk by Dan Pink on motivation. And you will find that psychologists distinguish motivation into two categories: intrinsic motivators and extrinsic motivators. Intrinsic motivators are what most of you have. You have a very strong interest in your own subject. You are intrinsically motivated, which is why you pursued a PhD. It's not easy to pursue a PhD if you are not intrinsically motivated in the problem at hand. So intrinsic motivation is necessary if there are complex tasks. For example, if you want to create music, you have to be intrinsically motivated to do music. But on the other hand, if you are not intrinsically motivated for music, but you are told that you will get credit of a certain kind, and you do music for that extrinsic motivation, that particular motivator, whatever it is, it could be reward or some such, becomes an extrinsic motivator. But what is very clear from literature is that for really, really good work, that means for innovative work, intrinsic motivation is key. And here I think administrators can take some lesson or some pointers for managing teacher scholars also, because most of the people here are likely PhDs and researchers and so on. So it is intrinsic motivation that will enable scholars here to think out of the box, think new, think innovatively, and also execute complex tasks. So extrinsic motivators and rewards will not keep them going for a long time. So extrinsic motivation can help you nudge a person, but cannot help the person achieve excellence. So ideally, what we need to do is identify or basically help the students determine their own inner motivators. And that is a challenge. It's not easy, but each one of us could actually think about it. What is it that intrinsically motivates me to teach, for example? And maybe that is the motivator, that is the driving force you should bring to the table every day. The same thing you could ask your students too. Next, please. So I will stop after talking about this. So this is Digital Team Maker. Digital Team Maker is an app, and there is also another app called catme.org, which allows you to use a random number generator to create teams. You remember I told you that you would like the teams to be approximately equal in skill level. Now it's very hard to achieve that. One way to achieve it is through random sampling of your class. Especially if the class is big and it is truly randomly sampled, then chances are that the average team that comes through a random number generator would have approximately similar skills. So you could use this team maker, digital team maker. It's free to use to generate teams. And you could also tell students that they are graded on effort. So very often we focus on only outcomes. We don't focus on process. But there is overwhelming literature now that suggests that students who value process of learning end up learning better in the longer run. And you and me understand this. Those of us who value the process of learning tend to learn much more, read much more, become much better masters of our own subject. Okay. Surprise quizzes can help. It enhances accountability. It provides some extrinsic motivators. So occasionally you could throw in a surprise quiz and say, okay, and that gives the students the motivation to revise between two classes and so on. And ask what is muddy. You can, just like one take home, you could also say, what is the one muddy point? What do you not understand from the last 10 minutes? So you can ask them and then clarify. So these are some things you could use to manage the class. Okay. So we'll stop at this point and take one-liners for the next 1 or 2 minutes. Very good. So somebody's quickly picked up on motivation, intrinsic versus extrinsic. Extrinsic motivation is truly long-lasting. That is true. Intrinsic motivation is necessary. Intrinsic motivation is necessary. There are challenges to ACL. Very good. What is muddy? And clarify the muddy points. Very good. EMM. Very good. That is manage, motivate, and encourage. Muddy point is can be clarified. Very good. Vanita madam says asking students what they did not understand. That is the muddy points. Very good. Surprise quiz can help provide some extrinsic motivation for revisions. Very good. Students rating themselves. Very nice. Nirmala Grace madam. Next is Divya Prabha madam. Quiz self-evaluation was honestly done. That's true. And RTD, AFM, PSG, intrinsic motivation. Subhatra Muthuswamy madam, Subhatra, importance of motivation. Very good. Limitations and problems with ACL, PSG, CT. Very good. Feedback about progress. Fantastic. Yeah, and by the way, you can give feedback too. So let us see, what am I missing? Learner motivation, student self-evaluation. Dr. Prema Gauri says, very good. Mr. Abdul talks about feedback about progress. Very nice. Mr. Gladwin says self-evaluation of students can be done. Very nice. Mr. Gnana Prakash says student self-evaluation, random number generator teams, that is using CATME, isn't it? Very good. Individual responsibility. Ms. Satya says, Susitra madam says process is more important. That is true. In the long term, those people who value the process end up learning much more. So even if they have not done excellently in your own class, you have helped them learn for life. That is the advantage. Okay. And motivation, this is where the philosophy of education helps. Motivation is the key, Mr. Radhakrishnan says, very good. Catme.org is a new idea, Rajamani madam says, very good. But observing evidence of learning helps, Mr. Vasu says, fantastic, very nice. All right, so Devsena madam, you can go to slide number 27.
27, yes.
27, yeah. So I am skipping the jigsaw part. Jigsaw part is something like the scaffolding, okay? And so you can use that as a homework. So write down jigsaw technique for teaching, and you will find some literature on that. Jigsaw technique. So I won't discuss that here. Now, way forward and some suggestions for teachers. So conditioning your thinking. So all of us have been taught by sages on the stage, or sages on stages. By that, what I mean is, the professor was by and large all-knowing and stood there, gave the lecture, and then we would diligently and studiously write down notes and come back and try to master it at home and so on. But here is a very different model, and so it requires us to think very differently. We are talking about becoming a co-learner with the students. We are talking about being open to lifelong learning. We are talking about intrinsic motivation for learning, extrinsic motivation and its limitations. We are talking about segmentation of the lectures, all of which are different but pointed out by science of education. All right. So that is that is very valuable, and this requires you to sort of think differently and philosophize differently about your own education and what your role is as a teacher. You can increasingly think of yourself as a facilitator and a facilitator mentor, and not necessarily just think of yourself the way you thought of your own teachers. So that helps a lot as well. And the next thing is learner centric education. That is, again, when I talk about learner styles, etc., that is learner centric. Micro LOs is saying that over the next 10 minutes, we'll learn dash. Okay, over the next 10 minutes, we'll learn dash. So the students are, as a consequence, alert, and they know that the next 10 minutes, they will learn something. Plus visual aids, concept maps, scaffolds, minute papers, these are all pointers. Next, madam. So, Queen Me Lee has written a wonderful article, and the link of which has been given. And she's an education researcher. She's published in this space also. But she was asked to write an essay given the situation with COVID and all that. And these are the 14 things she identified from literature that might be helpful for teaching during this COVID phase. Record your lectures, don't stream them, she says. So by that, what she's talking about, and I need to clarify this because she's talking about the Taiwanese, the Korean situation, which might be different from the Indian situation. So I'll tell you what she does, and maybe you can learn from her example. What she does is she actually records her lectures and then shares it in advance. And she uses the lecture only as a tutorial, lecture time only as a tutorial, wherein she's asking questions, engaging, asking students to report, think, pair, share, etc. So that is what Professor Lee does. But I'm not entirely sure if we can entirely map it for all the courses. Partly it is also because of the area of her work. Like she's a journalism professor and actually works slightly differently perhaps for journalism. But the other points might be very relevant. And I'll come back to the first point in a while. Show your face, keep videos short. So she says that's why I told you that even if you're using NPTEL, see NPTEL, one of the biggest challenges is the 50 to 60 minute duration. So it's very easy to fall off an NPTEL lecture. Instead, if you have gone through it and you know that between the 23rd minute and the 28th minute, there is high value content for a particular course that you're teaching associated with a particular video, then you share the video and say, okay, this is the time window that I want you to go through. Nothing more, nothing less. This is the time window. So make it very slick, very clear. Test out slides. That is, project the slides in advance if necessary and see if it is possible to see it on a small screen, because many students might be watching your lectures or participating on their cell phones. It is entirely a possibility. Next is use existing resources. In our case, NPTEL is widely available. Swayam is available. Vidyamitra is available. And for those of you who are in the humanities and so on, all of the above have humanities content. But IGNO has content. Those of you who are in law can also use IGNO contents and so on. That is Indira Gandhi National Open University content. All of this can be in principle used in order to facilitate your learners. So give specific instructions. Provide interactive activities so that something, at least there is interaction between you and them. For instance, when I'm asking you to put the one-liner and I'm reading it out, I'm trying to engage with you. You are trying to engage with me. And there is some value to it. Okay? And suppose you get friends, and the last semester I taught online and I had to actually take exams online also. And the campus said you have to do it asynchronously. That means I had to meet with each student to run the exam. It was so exhausting. So, and there are days that go by when I don't meet a friend or a family. I'm just working back and forth. So there were occasions wherein I might have felt exhausted, frustrated. But in those occasions, I used the students as my friends. So I would say, you'll have to be a little patient with me because I am exhausted right now. You'll have to be patient with me because I'm tired right now. I have not slept well. So it is open. It is that kind of openness that can actually help again build a trusting relationship between the teacher and the taught. I believe the same thing is true between the admin and the teachers also.
The admins can actually, for example, in personal conversation with teachers, talk about the challenges they face, take feedback from the teachers, take the support from the teachers, or vice versa. Teachers, so that as a consequence, goodwill and trust are two things that you can actually build on, even in an online setting. Next, please. So pointers for university administrators. So there is research that is also going on teacher motivation. For instance, what motivates a teacher to do well, what burns out a teacher. So teacher burnout is a real phenomena. And I don't know how it is in your respective campuses, but here I can tell you on campus, it is a real phenomena. The campus I teach in, I mean, there are very few people willing to accept it, but it is true. You will see people walking, not smiling, not responding to sort of even basic gestures are missing and so on. It's all evidence of burnout in some sense, or evidence of mood related challenges that teachers face because of their work pressure, maybe because of pressure from funders, and so on and so on. So what is it that needs to be done so that teachers remain motivated and they don't get burnt out? Now, one thing that is coming out, yes, that is true, Mr. Radhakrishna, I'll come to that. So, um, so it turns out that what is very, very clear, at least as of now, as far as the literature is concerned, the literature is very clear that teachers have to be able to see self-actualization. That means teachers should feel that they are pursuing mastery, their scholarship, they are able to sort of see a win-win between their research and teaching. They are able to see some purpose, some connection between their personality and their eventual life goals and teaching. When these things are enabled through systematic policies, it helps. And by and large, these policies should be even administrator friendly. So here is where I think policy research in education is at its infancy globally. By the way, it has not been very widely studied in the context of educational frameworks. Next, please. So this is meta-analysis of autonomous and controlled forms of teacher motivation. So autonomy seems to help. And by the way, this is rather important because teachers are not the only category of people who seem to want autonomy. These studies have been reproduced in companies also, and companies that give autonomy to their employees, for instance, Google, tend to keep employee motivation high. Teacher motivation tends to be higher when autonomy is higher. And it also turns out that formative and supportive feedback tends to be highly valued. This is also true for in organizational behavior literature, for instance, where people have studied companies which have high retention, high employee satisfaction, and so on and so on. Next, please. So, all right. So here is a recent paper. I won't read out the abstract, and because we are running out of time, I will stop very soon. So an engaged teacher, that means a teacher who is engaged with the students, engaged with the content, engaged with the institution, is a real asset. And what is essential is very similar to what we do for students, what we need to do for teachers also. That is, we need to be able to value good people and give positive affirmations to the goodness that they bring to the table. Next, please. These are courses that are helpful for online teaching. So the first one is very helpful because it puts together a bunch of pointers for teachers who would be teaching during the COVID phase. And then how do I, by that what I mean is, how do I use technology? How do I manage misbehavior in class? How do I do this? How do I manage time? So this particular link should help you teachers because it actually contains a list of how do I questions and responses, primarily based on literature. Again, as I told you, there is no solution, one-point solution to everything, but it will tell you what literature points to. Next is nice set of articles on active learning is available here, which you are all welcome to look at. Next, please. Yes, so I have also in the past spoken about special education. Special education is education for students who might be having learning disabilities, for instance, or having physical challenges. Gifted education, which is education for students who are a little ahead in the curve, and how to make sure that they are not bored, how to ensure that they are engaged and motivated. Inclusive education. This, by the way, the framework policy for which is actually constantly being updated by MHRD and so on. But we are far away from implementing it, to be honest. And next is academic and research writing. And for those of you who are scholars, many of you are scientists and engineers here. My work is in nanomaterials for energy and environmental engineering, both energy and environment. I do nanostructures related work, both computation as well as experiment. So you're welcome to talk to me about those also. Next. So I'll stop here.